Let me start this review by defending Lapis. I wonder how many of you saw that coming. I'm sure this episode made those who are already annoyed at Lapis's past behavior more resentful of her, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of people calling her selfish. While yes, her actions are indeed selfish, I also see her decision as entirely justified. Lapis unknowingly ended up caught in the slaughtering grounds and was then interrogated as a war prisoner after being turned into a mirror. She definitely has PTSD, and I think it's very understandable that she never wants to face the same thing ever again. I think her intense and immediate reaction to Steven's news speaks volumes about the scars left on her psyche. So yeah, she is selfish and self-preserving, but I personally don't blame her for it whatsoever, and when it comes to these sorts of situations, I think the individual should be able to make their own choice whether they want to risk their lives fighting in a war or not. I also appreciate that there's a character with a different perspective from the rest of the gems on Earth. She has different motives from the rest, and even if I do think she'll side with the crystal gems when push comes to shove, it's nice that at least for now, she has a pretty dissenting personal opinion on the matter. It's not as if this is an easy decision for her. She will no doubt experience a lot of pain and guilt from this fallout. I can understand the mindset of somebody who just wants to get away from all the horrible bloodshed and warfare and live peacefully isolated from any of that sort of trouble. Lapis making the decision to leave at the episode's end is actually the only part of the episode I found enjoyable, because the rest was just really boring. It was immediately obvious Peridot wanted to stay and was simply trying to avoid telling Lapis her true feelings. Killing time until that confrontation was so basic and formulaic and by the book, it just was not interesting. And because of that, it was at least mildly refreshing that Peridot's heartfelt speech still ended in heartbreak for her. And what a speech it was! It was very inspiring. You've got away with words at times, Peridot, but that awesome speech just makes it that much better when Lapis ends up not changing her mind regardless. But when it comes to that first 70% or so of the episode, it was just such a bore to see an obvious storyline stretched out to fill an entire episode's time slot. Peridot can be a very fun character, but in this episode, the time she spends with Steven was just a drag. There was one tiny thing regarding Lapis I was a little bit weirded out by, and that's Lapis complaining about how Peridot didn't tell her sooner. It was like 2 hours ago that Lapis decided to blast off the planet on a turn of a dime. It's rather silly for Lapis to be bummed about Peridot not telling her sooner when she never gave Peridot sufficient notice or time to think everything over. But resurging war trauma is actually a very decent excuse for lack of thought and consideration. Steven. So my overall verdict? A pretty boring slog of an episode until the inevitable sad finale. I'm curious if they'll actually defy expectations and do something interesting with Lapis going forward, or if her story arc will just coalesce into a predictable big cliché. Only time will tell, I guess.